Hello there, and welcome to the Second Life Book Club. My name is Draxtor Dupre, and today on the show, longtime Second Life resident, prolific writer, machinima maker, Huckleberry Hax. And folks, I cannot believe how late to the party I am because Huckleberry published his first novel, AFK, back in 2007, shortly after he uh, was born in Second Life, I believe, just a few months after. We'll get the details in a little bit. And I'm reading it now. It is absolutely hilarious. The prose is superb. This should be handed out in the welcome areas in Second Life. This is a kind of a detective, a noir type thing. Uh, the hero is a fellow by the name of Definitely Thursday. Thursday, he's the narrator. He's a detective in Second Life. He's exposing residents who cheat on their SL spouses, something that absolutely never happens. Uh, Huckleberry is using Second Life as his world, as his backdrop. He is telling stories that are so detailed in their understanding, the depiction and understanding of SL culture. It is absolutely amazing. I want to just throw, if you're not familiar with his work, I want to throw a few um, quotes here at you, a few excerpts. This one is where Definitely Thursday has an alt, a honeypot, a female alt, and the female alt's name is Susan Sonnet. And this is very early on in the book, and he Definitely Thursday is telling the story here. You walk into a place wearing an avi like Susan, and the first thing that happens is that IM windows appear to start breeding right in front of you. Poor old Def, that's himself, definitely thirsty, in his denim jacket and Whitesnake t-shirt can stand in the corner of a dance hall for an hour and watch 60 minutes worth of other people dancing come and go, but not Susan. Sometimes the carpet hasn't even rezzed beneath her feet before the first of her offers start coming in. Now, this is his hot alt that is there to entice the cheaters, and then they take pictures or whatnot. So this is just one example of an SL encounter, which is just absolutely hilarious. Here's another one that I want to discuss with Huckleberry in the show, because this is a little bit of a serious issue about communication in Second Life. Um, I'm going to read this excerpt. And therein lies the problem with SL communication. It's not what you say, it's the way that you say it, kind of. Sure, we use smileys and stuff, but we're never really sure of the manner in which things have been said. Tuning into the nonverbals is impossible because there are no nonverbals, although we look for them all the same. It's like anthropomorphism, where you attribute human qualities to inanimate objects or animals. At least I think that's what it is. I guess it probably isn't, but you know what I mean. And this is from Huckleberry Hax's AFK. This is the narrator, Definitely Thursday, talking about this. A really interesting look at communication. In the book, by the way, most people communicate with chat, which I also find a really powerful part of the story, because it lays bare the opportunities of talking with people who come from all over the spectrum, socioeconomic spectrum, ethnicities, genders, and it requires a little bit of a different type type of communication, a little bit more patience that I found. But anyway, I digress. These books are awesome. Um, Huckleberry Hax is here. Thank you for coming, Huckleberry. How are you?
Thank you for having me, Drax. I'm good, thank you.
Now, this is amazing. Would you say that these books, can you recommend the AFK series to people who um, are not familiar with SL? And a related question: when you made the decision to use Second Life as the world where this story takes place, as really the main protagonist, were you worried to have to explain what it is, or did you say, wait a minute, you know what, I'm going to mm, not over explain it. I do what the narrative demands. I mean, this is my impression reading it. The balance is very well accomplished here. And if a few people sort of drop off 20 pages in and don't understand what's going on, I don't care.
So I wrote the first of these books, AFK, in National Novel Writing Month. I think it was 2007. This book that you're reading now is actually a collection of 5 novels, and AFK is the first one of those. And The thing is, with writing a novel, a 50,000 word novel in 30 days, is you have to really enjoy it. Otherwise, you're just not going to get past 3 or 4 days, if I'm honest. I guess first and foremost, what I wanted to do was to write something that I kind of enjoyed writing, and I didn't want to go into the massive details of explaining to the uninitiated what Second Life was. And it was
Mm.
kind of my plan all along that, if I actually managed to make it to the end, and if I was reasonably happy with it, that I'd put it online for free so that people from Second Life could read it. So to answer your first question, would
You
it
didn't
make
have any
sense?
grand ambitions of like, okay, I'm gonna be the first guy who's gonna use Second Life as a backdrop, and I'm gonna make this just totally my unique niche, and I'm gonna be the best at it.
Not really, no. I guess I kind of felt at the time possibly someone else has already done this. I didn't really know. So I no, not really. It was, but I guess I thought that that the context of Second Life made a good context for potentially stories, and I just wanted to have a go at that. Really,
Mm.
I didn't want it to be a guide on how to use Second Life. I've When I look at the review comments that are left on Amazon, I think there's a few people who aren't familiar with Second Life who found it okay. They found it compelling. I know there's been a few people who haven't been in Second Life who just haven't been able to penetrate it. But I guess it was never my intention to write a book that said this is how you do Second Life. What I
Right.
did want to do is write a book that said something about this is what Second Life is like, what it's like to be an avatar in Second Life. I don't know if that makes sense.
You totally accomplished this, and it's interesting. So on the Amazon reviews or other or Goodreads, there's no review that says, um, "Oh my God, why did you like explain all this kind of stuff? Why did you not have more action? It's boring." From a Second Lifer, I guess. Is there any feedback like that?
I don't think so. No. Tell me what you mean a bit more about that by that comment.
No, you were saying you didn't want to write a novel or a how-to guide of Second Life, or just sort of weave a detective story around a how-to guide, I guess.
Uh-huh.
And I wonder if there are people who would say that there is too much of explaining how Second Life works in there, because I was really impressed with, like I said, the balance of setting something in a world that, like, if I look at it through the eyes of someone, and I think about this with my films all the time, like how does somebody perceive it, right? Because I get feedback from my films where people say, well, I don't want to. Why do badly animated people run around in this place? I mean, that makes no sense, because
Mm,
people look at it as sort of an animated movie, and then you have to explain, well, wait a minute, this is an actual world.
mm,
And there have been attempts to incorporate Second Life into sort of popular formats. CSI New York comes to mind. Well, good, that's a film. But the question is really again about the balance. How did you um, arrive at this balance, not to over explain it and not to sort of um yeah, just hit people over the head with what Second Life is.
I think the key to Second Life is interaction. I'm slightly bemused by this whole debate about whether it's a game or not. The key to Second Life is interaction. So the first extract that I'm going to be reading later on is about how, for that character, for Definitely Thursday, how it is a moment of interaction that transforms Second Life from being a slightly kind of odd-looking world where nothing much makes sense to being an immersive place. So I guess I'm glad that you liked the inclusion of the chat logs in AFK. So when I was writing
Absolutely.
AFK, that was quite important for me, because one of the things that, when I was thinking about writing the book, was just how funny sometimes chat can be when you're reading.
Mm.
Whether it's in IM with an individual person, but or whether it's with in a larger group. And at the time, in my first year or so of Second Life, I was friends with somebody called Medi. She left Second Life years and years and years ago, but one of the reasons why I hung out with her and with other people was just she was just hilarious in her instant messages, and so I kind of wanted to capture some of that humor, some of the funny things that happen in messaging when you're interacting with other people, and try and capture that sense of what it's like, rather than trying to describe, the awkward movement, the odd graphics, and so on.
This is really brilliant. And here's a quick book excerpt that I found very funny, where definitely Thursday, our protagonist here, the detective, is also here in with an alt, and it's a newbie alt, and he's sort of trying to get into this group and try to observe them. And here he says, the first day I just hung out on the periphery of the group. Lurking is the term, I believe. The next day I laughed at some of their jokes, and one of them, not the target, asked me how I was enjoying SL. And so I used the killer line, Bilko Ben 57 Hex. I like, but no one is to make friendship with me. And then he gets inundated with friendship on this particular alt. So, yeah, I mean, all these cultural things for us, longtime Second Lifers, this is just, I mean, to me, this is a very warm feeling. There's a lot of parallels when I first came in 2007. So that makes it very resonant with
Yeah,
me. And I guess, I mean, I'm kind of harping on this question, and I don't know how relevant this really is. How much does this appeal to people outside of Second Life? I actually believe that it now with, maybe with the whole metaverse thing, it's also kind of a historical
yeah, yeah,
account in a way
yeah.
of a world that is so fundamentally different from what the Mr. Zuckerberg is proposing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I guess I did have, to some extent, that thought that it kind of serves as a future record of what it was like to be in Second Life.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll not be in a position where Second Life is something that we only remember for a great many years.
And then
But
people run around in Zuckerberg's metaverse and they find your book somewhere buried underneath, like the this book by Walter Miller. What is it called? The Leibovitz Chronicles. Anyways, yeah. Uh,
yeah,
you were gonna, I was stepping on you. If not, let me just also throw this out because I brought up this one book excerpt about communicating, and this is important. I want to ask you this. What I found making my little documentaries is that communicating in Second Life with people whose life you don't know on outside of the avatar can be incredibly enriching, but it requires a much different type of communicating. It requires much more patience. I work, as people know, a lot with the disability community. It's interesting encounters there where one friend of mine who has a speech impediment, when he uses voice, people think he's a troll.
mm,
Some people don't have the patience to kind of like get to know him better and those kind of things. And you very early in the book, the hero definitely Thursday is kind of sort of thinking about how communicating is different here because you don't know who these people are, and again it requires the willingness to I don't know, to well, patience, and also the knowledge that that this may be people who you would not encounter in real life. So in
yeah.
your mind, is that an advantage of Second Life? I mean, this is a very softball question. I think we both agree that it can be a huge enriching experience. But anyway, in the book, he's sort of thinking about that, and I never thought about it that way, that it could be so challenging.
Yeah, I mean, we are obviously, although voice has been a thing in Second Life for a great many years now. Chat still is primarily the text is still primarily the medium of communication, and text, of course, strips away so much of the context. It's difficult to get a sense of where a person's coming from when they say a certain thing, to interpret, I mean, things like sarcasm, for example.
Yeah.
You kind of need the non-verbals to be able to, and to be able to read that. And yeah, and yet people still use sarcasm in Second Life. It's not that people avoid it. They're absolutely not. They employ the same range of emotions and that they would do in person to person speaking. So you have to do a lot more reading between the lines. There's different ways of punctuating things in Second Life chat. So the length of utterance is often quite important to working out what people where people are coming from and the way in which they're saying things. The wording is important. But I guess to kind of to pick up on that point they're making there about, if you like, misunderstanding. I do think there's a lot of potential for misunderstanding. I mean, not
Yeah.
just in Second Life. I mean, we see this in text-based communication all over the place, in social
But I'm
media,
not so
a lot.
sure if it's the text. Sorry to jump in here, because what I also find interesting, Estelle is a visual medium, but your book. I mean, again, I'm judging this from the first 70 pages, which are really fantastic. But you also, I mean, the people communicate in text mainly, and
Yeah.
they're doing a good job. And it seems to me that in the story, what I get, what I get out of it is that if people realize that they have to learn the cultural norms and the settings, and if they're willing to learn that and then apply them, they will be successful in communicating with people. And that applies to every, I mean, it applies if you move to a different country or to a different city even.
Yeah, I think I think I think there's a skill set that needs to be learned, and I'm not sure that everybody has it in Second Life. I'm not. I wouldn't assume that they would have, but I think when there is an element of learning to maybe, maybe question the way in which you interpret something that you're reading. I mean, yes, in the book that you're reading, I've obviously used I've created examples where people understand what others are saying, because to portray a misunderstanding in text is quite a complicated thing within the work of fiction. Um, but I do think a lot of people are good at it. I think a lot of people could be better at it. I think we sometimes just need to press pause sometimes before we respond to something that we think has been written in anger, or
Hmm.
with malice, or we think that a particular sentence betrays a particular point of view that we disagree with. We just need to be a bit more careful. I have knowledge and experience of working with people on the autism spectrum, and for many years there has been this predominant theory that people with autism lack empathy, lack an ability to understand other people's perspectives. And
Hmm.
there is a seed of truth within that. But more recently, the autism community has been talking about what they call the double empathy problem, which is that communication is not just about the autistic person finding it difficult to understand how the non-autistic person will make sense of their utterance. It's also about the non-autistic people having difficulties making sense of how people on the autism spectrum might construe a particular uh, 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 context or interaction. So the onus is on all of us. The onus is on all of us to think about
Hmm.
our text communication, to think about what we're writing, how it might be received, and to think also about the things that other people are writing into text, and just to not jump in there with the assumptions that we might automatically have about that line of text.
Absolutely, really well said. And Ava actually here in the local chat says some people don't have the patience for the learning curve. This is really well said. People talk about the Second Life learning curve and how to push the buttons
Yeah.
and how to get voice working. But this is the real learning curve, is to and I would argue in the physical world, it's the same with people who can quote unquote function as we want them to function, with certain ability diverse uh, people, and or older people, or what have you, and that is something. once you
Yeah.
interact with people
I
with
mean, there,
yeah.
it also comes with a huge advantage. I mean, it's worth saying that when you're in interaction in text, in live text interaction, you've got an awful lot of extra thinking time that you don't have when you're talking to someone face to face. This is why, of
Yes.
course, people on the autism spectrum have taken so well to the internet because, when you're in live chats, you've got all the way up until you press the enter key to reappraise your sentence.
Yep.
You can think, hang on, no, 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 that's not a good thing to say. I'm just going to delete that and start again. So there is a qualitative advantage, I think, to text communication and the way in which we do it. Ava's just noted there, the extra few seconds can save you from yourself. I couldn't agree with that
Yep.
more. So yeah, it's not only disadvantaged in terms of the lack of contextual information, but there's advantage to it, I think, as well.
We have a few people with a mother with a boy with autism in my upcoming documentary. She says exactly what you were saying about the this is in the COVID context where a lot of people say, "Oh, we can't go to campus and we can't really get the full spectrum of human interaction." And she says, for my son, um, this was actually very, very good, and he's really thriving. Shyla says in the local chat, "Do you think that it's because we think others inherently understand what we mean, even though tone and facial expression is missing? Facial express facial expressions apply to voice too." I'm not sure in what context this question is, Shala. Maybe you want to rephrase it, but that is something that is also, I mean, oftentimes seen as a disadvantage, especially with the VR people who view Second Life as inferior with the lack of real time motion tracking, for example, or facial tracking, for that matter.
I mean, it's a common problem in person to person interaction in real life that we tend to assume um, that others understand what we mean, and if there's a misunderstanding, then we can overinterpret why that misunderstanding took place. So I'm not sure that all of this motion tracking stuff. I don't know. Maybe it's going to help. Maybe it's going to help. But I think actually what I would rather see happening in people is that they were kind of tuned in better to the way, or thought a bit more, if you like, about how their messages might be received and about
Hmm.
how other people, the range of meanings that might happen. It's a social skill that we lack as a society. We do tend to be quite egocentric, I think, when it comes to our interpretations. I've seen this. I've seen this, for example, when people who are monolingual English talk to people who speak English as an additional language, who might have an excellent technical grasp of English,
Yep.
but then the monolinguals drop into all kinds of colloquialisms. One I heard many years ago. The first one that got me thinking about this was a friend saying to a person for whom English was additional language that something had they were talking about their evening shift in a hospital, and they said that it all gone a bit dot cotton. Now, unless you're a UK viewer of a very specific TV program in the UK, you would have no idea what that means.
I
Uh,
know.
and and so for and what fascinated me was not that the person who spoke English as an additional language didn't understand that. What fascinated me about that most of all was that the monolingual English person had assumed that they would, and I was thinking, well, how
Mhm.
on earth would that colloquialism have been understood? So I think that's possibly an example of what Shiloh is talking about. Is that assumption that the wordings that we use are understood by everyone.
Ava is mentioning Sherry Turkle, who is a great researcher. She wrote a whole bunch of books that I highly recommend. And I am, in fact, talking to Sherry Turkle as we're trying to get more social scientists on the program. Um, since we're talking a little bit about this um, immersion and how to feel more present and how to feel more connected. Shyla prepared a few slides here, and she prepared this one with a quote from you, where you talk about the four components of immersion. Places with a specific function is number one. Then functional places where other people act in a contextually appropriate manner. Number three, the movement of our own avatars, for the knowledge that others can see and judge us, activating our responses to being in the company of others, whatever that may be. I really like that because, like we were just talking about, it does not talk about 8K resolution,
Yeah.
which doesn't bring us closer to our fellow human beings, unless you're a techie in Silicon Valley and you're working on that project.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
I mean,
kind
I
of a very myopic view that these people have, but I don't think I say anything controversial here.
well, when we, you know, we when we, you know, when we were in, when you and I joined Second Life in 2007, Drax, you know that, you know, the visuals were nothing like they are right now, and that didn't matter, did it?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting because I think sometimes in this sort of narrow community is you get sometimes you get accused of like, oh, you're not interested in technology moving forward. That has nothing to do with it, but to equate a deep understanding, I mean, isn't it amazing that, I mean, this is a book program. We're talking about books. We're talking about the ability, the human ability to conjure up worlds in our mind's eye from these black little dots on white pieces of paper,
Yeah,
right? I
yeah,
mean, yeah, sure, there's some improvement in that regard, but not much.
yeah.
It's been like that
Absolutely.
for a long time.
I mean, I think there's a strong argument to be said that that much of Second Life interaction is essentially live creative writing with illustrations.
Yes, that that is wonderfully said. Sorry, I'm reading the chat here. Stella says the letter writing culture of the past does not exist today. Perhaps writers may have had greater sensitivity to the reader 100 years ago, a couple hundred years ago, used a greater range of words to express a feeling or idea. Not
Mm.
sure. Maybe people write letters. There's all sorts of you know niche interests. I'm not sure if if everybody. I don't know. That's
I have a bit of a thing about email writing, which is I get I get very irritated by one-line emails, and it's been my observation in the past. I teach occasionally at university, and I notice this with students in particular, that they'll send very brief emails, and which
yeah.
seem to assume that you know exactly what it is that they're talking about when they talk about you know, that section in the handbook that says X. And I, by contrast, when I'm writing my own emails, I can spend, I don't know, 20 minutes on a 4-line email because I want to make sure it's absolutely crystal clear. So I think there might be something in that about the demise of letter writing culture, that actually when we wrote letters, we knew that, you know, this transaction in communication was going to take, you know, minimum of days, you know, potentially weeks. So we had to kind of take more time, put more effort into make sure that we make our meaning more clear, because if we haven't, then to correct that misunderstanding is going to, you know, be an awful. It's a bit like you know, taking photographs with a film camera as opposed to a digital camera. You know, you used to take
Yeah.
more time considering whether you wanted to take the picture and composing the shot, whereas now you'll just snap it. And I think possibly I hadn't really thought about it in terms of the demise of letter writing culture, but I think that's a really interesting angle on it.
Stella, I want to make clear that I'm not dismissing your comment. I'm just trying to sort of find out exactly how many people actually did write amazing letters back in the day. To me, all this stuff is incredibly worrisome, and it goes to what Neil Postman wrote about in his book "Amusing Ourselves to Death." And it's all a slippery slope and an accelerating path into less and less attention span. There is absolutely no doubt about that.
Mm,
And the reasons are manifold. Yeah, people are not willing to engage much. People feel that they don't have the time. Then, if you are in an exploitative labor relationship, for example, then why would you take the time, and so on and so forth. And yeah,
yeah, yeah.
a lot of people thought that Second Life was the beginning of the end. Meanwhile, it is not.
Here we are, still here.
um, I would say let's do a little reading, and the excerpt that you chose is actually really cool because it ends on a really cool part that I had prepared for the for the discussion. So now let's see if we can get this going. Magically, a book stand should appear from underneath. Usually we have someone bring this up, but let's see here. Huckleberry is one of the first guests who does not need to practice how to get up off his chair. That's good.
I'm a pro.
So this is from AFK, and again, these are five novels. You started writing them in 2007, and real quick, you did you come into Second Life as a writer? Give us the thumbnail sketch of your origin story as a writer.
I mean, I've always wanted to be, I can remember being, deciding I wanted to be a novel writer when I was about 8 years old. And I didn't really have a stab at it until a lot later. Submitted my first novel to a publisher in 1997. It got nowhere. I got rejection slips, as many writers do. And then came into Second Life to do National Novel Writing Month, and to join a writing community. And then in the subsequent year, I thought to myself, do you know what? Second Life would be a great place. And so I'd been through about something like 10 years. Yeah, actually, almost exactly 10 years since I'd finished
Wow.
this novel that had, and during that time, I hadn't really done much apart from this first National Novel Writing Month, which actually I haven't published that. That's actually a children's novel. So then I thought, well, I think Second Life would make a great context for stories. So yeah, so that's what I did. I decided to do that. So I had written something before, but not as Huck. That was my kind of first novel as Huck.
What why what was that an easy decision to write as Huck as your Second Life avatar pseudonym?
Ah, you know what? I initially thought of that as being something slightly gimmicky. I thought, oh, I can put this online under my avatar's name. But do you know, it's the best decision I ever made, because one of the whole things about uh, National Novel Writing Month is about trying to kind of put what they call the inner editor on hold. So the
Mhm.
whole contention of National Novel Writing Month to write 50,000 words in 30 days is that people don't do that. People don't write novels because they start writing and then they become self-critical. They lose self-belief and they screw it up, toss it in the bin and start again. And so you just go through that process ad infinitum and nothing ever gets done. So in order to write a novel of that quantity, it really is about focusing on quantity over quality. But the great news is that actually once you start writing at that level,
Mhm.
the quality starts to improve all by itself.
Well,
So it's all about
you gotta have some talent. Don't sell yourself short. You gotta have a little bit of
I
talent.
mean, everybody is different. Everybody's got their own skills, but it was a very liberating thing in the first place to just turn off that I need to edit this as I go. No, you edit afterwards. But then the other thing was that, but, because of course when you're writing these things, you're thinking, well, if I'm going to make this available, what's my what's my mother going to think of of some of the things that I'm writing here? What will colleagues of mine think? What will my friends think? So
Mm.
then the second part is actually once you have made that decision to write under a pseudonym, you're suddenly kind of liberated, and you can think, well, actually, I can just write whatever I want, whatever I think will fit, and I don't need to kind of worry about what other people will make of it. So those
Mhm.
two things together, in a sense, combines to really kind of kick me out of my writer's block that had been lasting for about 10 years at that point.
That is amazing. That is really okay. I know we need to read, but I find it so fascinating. I got to ask one more question. Have you regretted your Second Life name at all, or I mean, when you signed up, was that
I'm
very
wondering why you're
fast?
asking me that. I just thought it
No,
was a
I
cool.
love your name. I
I thought
think
it was
it's
just a
great.
cool piece of alliteration,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, absolutely. No, no, because I know people and I mean, this is so funny because another fun part of your book is all these avatar names. They're hilarious. They are
Yeah,
absolutely hilarious. And I do know a lot of people who tell me, "Oh my God, if I knew how cool this was and that I would stick around, I would have chosen a different name." And for me personally, it took me 2 seconds to come up with this name, and then I go down the list, and boom, there it is. And now it's sort of the brand name.
yeah.
And all I'm saying is, I know a lot of people who go like, "Oh my God, you got such a cool name. If I had this name, my God," and they go like, "I didn't even think about this at all."
Well,
So
you know, I agree completely. Huckleberry Hax has become my kind of brand name. Huck has the advantage that it rhymes with a four-letter swear word, so I can call my blog "What the Huck." So you know, it's yeah, I've not regretted the name. I'm pleased that I chose to spend the 30 seconds or so of thinking what we'll go with Hacks, because Hacks of course is one of the Linden surnames, and so I thought Hacks, you know, if we're going to go for a single syllable surname, we want a first syllable, a first name needs to have as many syllables as I can chuck at it. So Huckleberry is was what I kind of came up with.
awesome. Go Speed Racer E says points to the name over his head. Go Speed, I'm not subtweeting you. Okay, let's read here. Let's read. Detective Definitely Thursday or Def Thursday. His boss, what's his name? Step Stransky.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, what else
Okay.
do we need to know? He goes right into talking about his first experience in the winter.
Yeah, so this is an extract from this is actually the entirety of chapter 6. Quite a lot of the chapters in AFK are quite short, and really this is about him, the main character, reminiscing over those first experiences and the kind of the moment when Second Life kind of seemed to snap into place. All right, so this is chapter 6. My newbie month had been December, full of white and crunchy locations. It's possible I imagined the crunchiness, full of ice rinks and pine trees and falling snow. Okay, so not for the first week. That was spent on orientation stroke help island where the seasons don't encroach. And not so much for the second week either, or at least the first part of it. That was spent pretty much wandering about on the mainland close to Bear. I hadn't really got my head around search back then, or flying. Actually, I was a bit of a slow learner all round. I got bored of it all so quickly. Nothing but empty shops, it seemed, full of things I couldn't afford and couldn't see the point in buying in the first place, not that I could afford them anyway. I went for a phase that I think most residents can identify with, wandering around from sim to sim and coming steadily to the conclusion that the world had gone completely mad. I came across an art exhibition after a couple of days of wandering. The building was 3 stories high. Each concrete textured wall was full, but not too full, of RL paintings and sketches that someone was trying to sell. A single AV sat inside, a female newbie of the girl next door mold, sitting on an egg chair near the entrance. Text above her head announced she'd earned 8 lindens so far. The seat beside her promised 2 lindens per 10 minutes perched, so I sat on it. And with that, I discovered camping. Stacy 12 Hardcastle. Hey, definitely Thursday. Hello. At my desk in the real world, my heart started thumping just that little bit faster at the onset of my first ever SL conversation. An anti capitalist my whole thinking life, it had taken the promise of a payment rate at a fraction above a penny an hour to entice me out of my antisocial state, and I didn't even have the plans for how to spend it. You thought the function of camping was making money? Think again. Even in my state of physiological apprehension, the irony wasn't lost on me. Stacy 12 Hardcastle, are you new to Second Life? It always fascinates me how newbies don't seem to realize just how easy they are to spot. The difference between noobs and non noobs is so obvious once you've a month or so under your belt. It's like telling the difference between black and white. Newbies just don't see it. It's like you go through some sort of perceptual transformation at some point, a moment of revelation where you look suddenly upon the computer monitor and cry out, "What the fuck is that on my head?" My avatar was slim, muscular, and devoid of facial hair, entirely satisfactory in the aesthetics department, I felt. And I reckoned Stacy 12 looked like a bit of all right and all. Definitely Thursday. Yes. And you? Suffice to say that the conversation which followed was mind numbing in its blandness. For half an hour, we sat there throwing extremely dull pleasantries at each other. It was like the first night in the Big Brother household. It was sickening. Eventually, we reached a point where 12 lindens an hour no longer came even close to being worth the level of boredom we were each enduring. Claiming we had real life stuff to attend to, we both logged off. I thanked Christ once the viewer was gone from my screen, and I'm sure she did the same. Ah, Stacy 12, whatever became of you? Is your second life happy? Do you ever think of me the way I think of you? Something happened to me sitting there with you, the two of us there together, two green blips in a lonely exhibition. Something clicked, a penny dropped. It wasn't a very large penny, that I can tell you, but it was enough to say, to stay what had been my imminent departure from this dull as shit virtual world for an extra day or two at least. Nothing you had said was of the slightest interest to me, but there was something, just something about our situation that gave me a strange feeling I couldn't quite make sense of. I went out for a walk to think it through that afternoon. I went as far as the garden centre on Allington Lane, in fact, and examined my reflection in at least 100 different baubles. I kept looking at my watch, wondering how long it would take me to get back home, wondering when I would log on next, and wondering what I'd do in Second Life in the future, and whether I would ever see Stacey 12 again. I couldn't understand where my enthusiasm for this was coming from, given that the highlight of our conversation had been a mini history of the varieties of Christmas trees she'd bought over the last 20 years and what games her son liked playing on the PlayStation. Finally, I grasped it. It came to me in the pub that evening with some of the guys from the castle. Fat Charlie asked me what I'd been up to on my day off. Instead of telling him I'd been on Second Life, I mentioned I'd visited an art gallery.
This is amazing. This is Huckleberry Hacks here reading from AFK, and everybody should read it. Everybody should get it. Thank you, Huck. Please take a seat again, and I can assure you that Stacy is still at the welcome area. I think I saw her there last week. But I'm so glad you picked this excerpt because it really parallels. I mean, it shows, I think, what a lot of Second Lifers feel about their initial. I mean, the people who are still here. I mean, it's really weird. You have an encounter, and the encounter has may have been extremely boring and bland, especially the camping. I had that same interaction with a person where like, how can you sit there?
Yeah.
This is really the end of culture and humanity as we know it. But there was but something was working underneath and was like, this is transformative. This medium, there is something
Yeah.
that I need to keep exploring. So I suppose this excerpt is also a little bit you. I mean, this is kind of you, how you must have felt
Yeah.
in the
It was
beginning.
a mystery to me why it was compelling. And but I think it was those interactions. I think that's what pulls people in. You know, you start having those conversations with other people, and that's what turns it into this, if you're into video games, very poor looking video game, and turns it into a world, into a place, and an experience.
But why did it turn? Why did it not let it go? Let you go? Why did you want to continue? Because I can tell you with my enthusiasm in the first months, I went to everybody, to the butcher around the block, to my friends, to everybody. You gotta try this. You gotta try this. And 95% of these people, they tried and they go like, yeah, this is really boring. What the hell? And
But
they're
I think that's the point of the extract, and the character in the extract. They were they were they were at that point of being like our RL friends and
Mhm.
saying, "I don't get it. What's so special about this?" I think that's the point, is that you then have that moment, and when we're talking about those new signups, we talk about the importance of the first hour, we talk about the importance of the first week, we talk about the importance of getting the interface right, and all these things, of course, are important. Don't get me wrong. Technically, it is a difficult system to get the hang of,
Yeah.
but I don't think just simply making those things easier will make Second Life any more compelling to new residents. It's about having those interactive experiences where something suddenly clicks and it all falls into place, and suddenly it's a place. It's not a technical thing. It's not like opening up Microsoft Word. It's not like filling out a form on Chrome. It's a place that you go to,
Right.
and where you have experiences. And that's the problem. Those people aren't getting to that point where it becomes that. For them, it's just a tech thing that doesn't make much sense and doesn't look as nice as a video game.
Oh my God. And now that you're saying this, now I see the connection to a book. When you talk to people who are not readers who say, well, I don't know, it's kind of boring, I'm not into reading or whatnot. I feel often that they don't get to the point where
Yeah,
where the letters, as I mentioned earlier, these black little dots turn into worlds. And with this
Right.
last paragraph, you nailed it because it turned into a world. Nobody says when they go to a museum's website, they don't say I went to a museum. They will say I looked at a museum on a website. But in Second Life, we say I went to an art gallery, period.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes. Yes. That's right.
We discovered the secret sauce. Let me call the Linden Labbers real quick.
Well, this is why I've spoken very highly of Marina Manta's GBTH installation, because that's what she's doing there. She's creating art exhibition experiences, and you go there and it pulls you in, and it's an experience. You've done something in Second Life. It's no longer kind of looking at this thing on the screen. It's an experience.
But I mean, we can talk for hours, no doubt. Because now you're mentioning also something interesting because I had encounters with people who said sort of condescendingly about exhibits of paintings in Second Life. Said, what's the point? You can make total immersive stuff. Why would you look at a painting on a wall here? That's ridiculous. And I never
Yeah.
understood that because it's a different. I mean, I'm in a gallery together with other people and I'm looking at art. The stuff can totally coexist side by side,
Well,
just because. Yeah,
we're talking about two separate things here. So,
yeah.
so absolutely, yes, you can do far more than two-dimensional art in Second Life. Of course, you can, and so you know, yes, it allows you to do these amazing three-dimensional things. You know, again, which you can see in places like GBTH. But the crucial thing that you said there a moment ago was you can look at art with other people together. That's the thing. It's not about the type of art you're looking at that we are talking about here. What we're talking about here is about having that shared experience. That's the thing that makes you feel like you've been in a gallery. You've gone into a gallery, you've looked at something, whether it's a two-dimensional piece of artwork or a three-dimensional installation, and you're talking to somebody else about it. That's the thing that makes it an experience, not the nature of the thing that you're looking at. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Absolutely. I mean, my point here is that these things can all coexist just because
Yeah.
I mean, the same is true in music. I have a music background, and I remember when I was in the conservatory, there was, and I understand that impetus, but there were people who were obsessed and paralyzed at the same time with creating something completely novel. They're like,
Mm.
I mean, this is not new. This is sort of, I think every artist has that dilemma inside themselves and what I encountered in Second Life is when people go in and go like, wow, this is a completely malleable world. I'm going to create these installations that are very specific and they take advantage of these unique affordances, and if
Yeah.
I don't do that, then I'm not a real artist. And look at these boring people who are just hanging their paintings on the wall. That's ridiculous. And I think, you know what, you are ridiculous because you are the sorry, you're reducing the possibilities here, not
I
the
mean,
other way around.
again, it's a separate discussion. There's nothing wrong with wanting to use the medium to do something you can't do, within the confines of real life, to do
Yeah,
something innovative. But that's an art discussion. That's not an immersion in a virtual world discussion, if that makes sense.
yes. No, absolutely. And now I came across and I hear my own voice, and now people think like Draxter is somehow against actually doing something, I don't know, extraordinary and immersive and taking these unique affordances. I'm not. Don't send me hate mail. I'm gonna move on to the fact that Huck's stuff is on Lulu, and I said before we went on air that I ordered the AFK all of it, which is a beautiful book. Um, it's not inexpensive, but it is beautiful and worth it for me as a reader to have this book in the shelf. The editing and the formatting is perfect. So you opted for Lulu as a self publisher. um, what if what's the advantage? What's the disadvantage of Lulu? Does it even matter? Do people even order physical books? Uh, is Amazon better? What's the deal here?
Well, I think Lulu was around before Amazon Create Space kind of got going, at least before it got going in the UK. So when I started creating print copies, there was really own, and that's not entirely true. There were a few other places like Cafe Press that you could. The Cafe Press is now kind of mostly known as kind of for
Right.
merchandise,
I
like
thought they were T-shirt.
mugs.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah. To mugs and T-shirts now, but they used to do a book service. Um, so Lulu was the kind of the most comprehensive. Also, I really, I'm a real, the books I used to buy when I was a child and a teenager, they were these kind of little kind of pocketbook size things, and Lulu offered that size,
Hmm.
which was really great for me. The honest truth of the matter is that the print versions of my books don't sell many copies. Where all my sales tend to be is in the Kindle versions. I mean, occasionally people will buy a print copy, but quite a lot of the time, if I'm honest, Drax, I think when I'm making the print versions, I'm largely making them for me and my own bookshelf.
Yeah.
So
That's
it's
legit. That's why I still press my own CDs, man.
right. There you go. There you go.
So I could show them
I
to
do
the
love
people
having the
coming.
print versions, and and I put a lot of time and care into the formatting so that they will work in print. But yeah, it's a luxury, as you said. They're not inexpensive, and Lulu in particular has just put its prices up quite recently. So it's but I would ask if anyone wants to buy a print one to buy it from Lulu instead of from Amazon, because
Yeah.
Amazon take the most enormous cut. It's an eye-watering difference in terms of the in terms of what I make.
There's also a lot of stuff with them, and I don't want to get sidetracked, but I hear on and off issues about Amazon really paying out the right amount, and there's some sort of real sort of scam going on within Amazon. But as a self-publishing person, would you are you happy with that role, or would you rather have I don't know, an agent and a big publisher and hand all this stuff off?
Well, I mean, I'm a bit of a control freak. I mean, there's as we say in the UK, it swings and roundabouts, Drax. On the one hand, I like the fact that I have total control over everything. I like that a lot. Um, on the other hand, when this I'm obviously working on new stuff all of the time, but there's also kind of the management of the back catalogue. I mean,
Yeah.
I quite like to do some new covers for some of the old books. The Day is Full of Birds, for example, but obviously that requires a piece of work. I have to re-upload the finished book then to Amazon Kindle, to Lulu, to Smashwords that deal with all of the EPUB sales and all of the various different sites that draw from that. So that whole kind of management, the kind of the admin of stuff, can be a bit of a drag at times. But uh, I like the control that I have in the first instance. A lot of book covers these days when you go into shops, unless you are a best-selling author. A lot of the covers will tend to use stock photography. I get to design my covers to be exactly the way I want them to be, and I like that. I won't profess to be good at cover design. I think I used to be atrocious at cover design. I think I'm now okay at cover design. I've learned a few things along the way, but I do like the control that it gives me over the whole thing.
I think you just read my mind and then transcribed it and put it into better words and added a British accent to it because I couldn't agree more. It's a drag sometimes the day to day and sort of the logistical side of it, but to be an independent media maker is very gratifying at the end of the day. And I talk to a lot of people who deal, for example, in the documentary space, deal with some quite successful people who had stuff out on PBS television and so on and so forth. But what they go through in terms of trying to get grants and then discussing that and how these are being used, and then so many cooks on the in the kitchen in terms of editing choices. Even, anyways, I digress.
Mm.
This is more has to do with documentary. The publishing world and writing is a little bit. Is a little bit different. I'm scrolling back here through the comments because Caitlin Tobias said something funny here. She said, I spent my first 6 weeks on Orientation Island thinking that was Second Life. I heard that before. I heard that before from other people. And Isabel says that I have a basement full of CDs. Yes, if you want my CD, I ate chocolate and lost 20 pounds. My 2006 CD, I do have about 150 left. So, oh yeah, the other thing here is when I Googled Huckleberry Hax, it turns out he also writes poetry, and this book is actually available on Walmart.com in the US.
Was it really?
That yeah, I
Oh,
just put the
fantastic.
slide up here. It's 8.54. It's
All
eight
right.
dollars 54 cents. Paperback. Book is called Old Friend, Learn to Look Behind You in the Coffee Queue. What's the power of poetry for you, Huckleberry? In maybe in contrast to novels, and why is poetry important?
Uh, I think poetry is expressing different thoughts, different feelings, things that can't be expressed so easily in standard prose. As I was saying to you before the show began, I didn't really do poetry at all before I joined Second Life. That's something I learned to do entirely in Second Life,
Wow.
and there's a huge poetry community in Second Life. There's kind of uh, I've lost the phrase. Open mic
Open mic?
sessions
Yeah.
happening, several per day at various different places on the grid. At the time, I would go along to those, listen to other people's poetry, have a go at some of my own. Then there was also at the time, I don't know if this still exists, but there was a weekly poetry workshop where you would go along, take a poem that you'd written, and you would get it workshopped by the other poets there. They'd be taking it apart and explaining why a particular bit works and a particular bit didn't. And that was incredibly helpful for me. So yeah, I don't write poetry quite as much as I used to. I do still knock a poem out every now and again. But I've got about enough for a well, I've got about enough for half a new compilation so far, but I'm
Wow.
working on that. It's going to be called La Crimiara, and I'm hoping to get that out within the next couple of years or so.
Kippy says here poetry slams. Yeah. Uh, Also, real quick here on YouTube, Kitten Duo sent a super chat. Thank you. Kitten says, Draxter, thank you for doing this each week. And thank you, Kitten, for supporting us. And please join us in World sometime. We'll make you a special chair that is reserved just for you. Um, Huckleberry, some people find reading mentioned it earlier, and I want to read you this tweet that I tweeted, and I didn't get any hate from it, which is surprising. But I tweeted, "Please don't tell me you don't have time to read. You do. You choose not to read books, poetry, probably because consuming audiovisual media that repeats conventional narrative is the dopamine release agent you crave." Now that's kind of provocative. Then I wrote, I understand, but you're missing out on nourishing sustenance. Now, I phrased that a little provocatively, and I'm fully aware that there is a complex issue why people don't read. Some people are stuck in jobs that are draining energy, and they're being exploited, and their life force is literally extracted, which leads to an end of the day feeling of well, no energy left other than turning on the telly or whatnot. Um, our schools are not equipped to bring people into the reading fold. Um, but what would you say, Huckleberry, if you had like two or three tips how to incorporate reading into your daily life? If you wouldn't know what that daily life would be, because it probably varies per person. But there's
Mm.
a few tricks that I found, but I'm curious if you have any tricks or rituals how to incorporate reading for pleasure. We're not talking about reading spreadsheets or your tax returns.
I mean, I don't have many tips or tricks, but I mean, but the one that I do have is the approach that I take, and I can't see why this wouldn't work. And that is that reading is part of my daily bedtime routine. So
Mm,
I when I get into bed, it's not possible for me to just get straight into bed and fall asleep. I have to do some reading. I have to do some reading, and it's in terms of sleep hygiene, it's a great habit to do because of course. If we're looking at screens just before we fall asleep, screens expose us to blue light, which is the light that's in daylight, stimulates our brain into thinking it's the daytime. So we really should be staying off screens for at least a half an hour before bedtime, if not more. So if you're reading a book, and actually this applies to a Kindle book as well, because
Hmm.
Kindles, the old-fashioned Kindles, the Kindle that I have,
Right.
doesn't have blue light. It's an e-ink screen, so that's the same as looking at print on a page. And it's one of those things that, yeah, it does take you a while to get into a book. But then once you get into it, it just becomes this great routine, and you look forward to it every day. And your day's coming to an end, and you think, oh, time to go to bed. But now I get to find out the next little bit that happens in this great book that I'm reading. And it just becomes this. I just think it's just a great part. If you can't fit it in anyone else during the day, fit it in then, even if you're only reading a few pages. And I think you'd be amazed at the kind of qualitative difference it can have, on your mood state. It means also, of course, another reason why people find it difficult to sleep is they're turning over things that happen during the day. That's because they're thinking about those things when they turn off the light. If you're reading a book, it kind of pushes all of that to one side, and it replaces it with something else, a different world, a different way of looking at things, a different set of characters, a different set of personalities. So I think it's a great habit to do for your mental health and well-being, never mind for all of the kind of cognitive benefits it brings you in terms of different perspectives, different ideas, things you'd never thought about, worlds you've never visited, countries you've never been to, and so on. I think it's just a good mental health practice apart from anything else.
This is really, really awesome, Huck. So, folks, thank you, because this is very tangible and usable advice to incorporate this into your bedtime routine and set this time aside and just do it. And maybe it takes a little while if you've never done it, but try that. And if I may add one thing that I found out myself, other people have found this out a long time ago. It is extremely effective to put your phone in jail. The mistake that I made was to use the phone as my alarm clock and everything else. So I had it by my bedside. What I have done a few weeks ago is purchased a Casio digital watch for 29 euros. And this is now my alarm clock. And part of the bedtime routine is now also to shut the phone off, not leave it on the bedside table, but put it into a box and put it away outside of the room.
Mm.
And then I'm forcing myself to um, to engage with just the text. And so this was my own, affliction of when I wake up at night, check, hey, what's happening in America? What are these people doing? And that's just really bad. So,
You
anyways.
and I are in good synchronization, Drax, because I got a Casio digital watch quite recently as well.
See, all that stuff that was like outdated is hip again.
Yeah.
I mean they're pretty damn cool.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. Oh yeah. I love my Casio digital watch.
but the key really, I mean, to what you're saying is also really, I mean, this is just the human condition. I mean, we crave dopamine, we crave fast things that satisfy us quickly. And I mean, at least I have to separate myself from these things to get into a long thread of just being inside that moment. I mean, I gravitate towards big maximalist novels as it is, but even though I see the entire, even uh it's, anyways, I think I'm digressing here, but when I read something really compelling and the phone is next to me, the impulse is, and I can read for 2 3 hours straight, but then what I do is, oh my god, this is so awesome, I got to take a snapshot of this
Uh,
page, and I got to tweet it because it's so awesome. And I
no,
see it almost like as my public duty to
yeah,
show my follow, the evangelizing impulse of me, always then, is my Achilles heel, basically.
yeah. You do need that lockable box for your phone, don't you?
Absolutely. Well, Huckleberry, you're just saying it. You don't need one, but you do. I know it. I at least admit it. Okay, but I also was a heavy smoker, and I don't smoke anymore. But now let's read from your newest book. I know I'm changing the the sequence because you had a reading from a book called Your Clothing is Still Downloading.
Yep.
Uh, can we switch to the Virtual Thursday? That's your newest book.
Yeah, of course, absolutely, yeah.
And what is different? What have you learned?
So, so Virtual Thursday is a continuation of the story of the character from the AFK novels, but
Oh,
in
they're
this,
back.
yeah, but this is no longer in Second Life. So I decided I wanted to expand. I will say that at the time that I was originally thinking about this at the end of the AFK novels, I was that was at the time of all the VR hype. So of course I was imagining that the next place that Thursday would go to would be in virtual reality, and of course that never really kind of took off, as we know. Although we're hearing a lot of the same nonsense again, connected to the idea of metaverse. So it is the same character, but it's some time later, and it's a different type of story. I don't want to give too much away. I've moved the character on, but it's also a bridge novel
Mhm.
because I wrote a science fiction novel a few years back, which I then revamped last year as the novel "Thank You for Afterlifing with Us." It's on the coffee table between us there,
Ah, yeah.
and this is a metaverse of the future. So this is like, I don't know, 60 years into the future, something like that, where people die and they have their brains scanned before they die, and these scans are then uploaded into a metaverse. Before before this was a popular TV show, I had written about this idea, uh,
Uh-huh.
and um, I spent a lot of time on that novel. That wasn't a 30-day novel. That was a kind of like a 6-month novel that took me to write. I was very interested in the notion of things like, for example, how do you experience an emotion if you don't have a body? So if the only things your virtual brain gets fed are image and sound, and you don't have the sensations of smell or taste, or your internal body sensations as well as touch, how do you experience fear when fear is so integrally tied to things like racing heartbeat or twisting in your stomach? How, what is an emotion? How much of an emotion is in your head and how much of it is in your body? So I kind of started exploring that, and thank you for afterlifing with us. I'm continuing to explore that in the novel I'm currently writing at the moment, which is called "Love is a Corrupted Data Stream." And Virtual Thursday is the bridge novel that kind of connects
I
the
see.
world of AFK to that kind of future science fiction world. The future science
Okay,
fiction
okay.
world isn't going to be of interest to everybody in Second Life, but it's of great interest to me at the moment, particularly, in the context of all of the discussions about metaverse and so on.
Okay, so let me just summarize here. First, the AFK 700 plus pages, the first five. Then I go Virtually Thursday is the bridge novel that leads me to Afterlifing. Correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All right. There goes my David Foster Wallace Infinite Jest book club reading for the summer. I guess that's in the bin. But okay, so let's read. Let's read.
So this
Set the
particular
scene for us.
extract,
Yes.
the extra I've chosen here, I kind of chose it to contrast. This isn't about virtual world. This is the reflection of the main character, who obviously in the AFK novels we know is definitely Thursday. This is their own reflections on a bit of their backstory, which is obviously relevant to what happens in connection with virtual worlds in the story Virtual Thursday. That's a really, really arse over foot introduction, isn't it? Right. Anyway, so it's from chapter 15 of Virtual Thursday.
Okay.
I only ever knew one of my grandparents. My grandfather on my father's side, Henry, died several years before I was born from a heart attack. He'd been just 57 and had suffered a huge coronary at work after loading machine parts onto a pallet. His wife had survived him by only 3 years. She had a stroke at home while sitting in her armchair and listening to the radio. A picture of Henry had been found at her feet, dropped there in her final few seconds, or so my parents told me. My grandfather on my mother's side, Charlie, died from asbestosis about 6 months after I was born, his reward for a lifetime of low paid graft and demolition. That left my maternal grandmother, Agnes, a Navy Wren during the war. She was made from nails. According to my mother, she'd insisted on taking charge herself of the catering for Charlie's funeral reception, The very next day, she was back behind the counter in the charity shop she'd worked for 4 mornings a week since her retirement. And the first thing she did was to ask the manager if she could go full time for a while. My earliest memories of her are of her bouncing me on her knee and taking me into town on the bus on an occasional Saturday morning. I remember that she always wore fawn coloured gloves in the winter and that her handbag was never short of a supply of peppermint humbugs. She ended up outliving my mother, her only child, by 11 years, but this was an increasingly confused existence. The death of my parents hit her terribly. Where she'd taken the passing of her husband in her stride, the sudden departure of her immediate progeny broke her into pieces. I have a memory of her sitting by herself after the funeral, staring into space. When I went to her, she managed to drag herself back to the world for a brief moment and to smile at me sadly. Well, here we are, Emma dear, here we are. She patted my hand while she spoke, and her eyes drifted away from me and back to the void in front of her. We're all that's left of the story, and I am all that's left of my family. It was a moment that stuck with me because I never fully understood what she'd meant with those words. The first of my so-called long-term foster placements was with a family 40-something miles away from where my home had been. I remember trying to explain to my carers that we had to go visit my grandmother on Saturdays because that was what we always did. I'd lost my parents. I'd lost my home. I'd lost my school and my teacher, and I'd lost my friends. It made no sense to me whatsoever that I had to lose her as well. Why did everything have to be different? Even the shops we went to were different. Even the TV programs that got watched in the evening were different. Even the food we ate and the time we ate it was different. The more I insisted on this, and the more angry I got by my carer's reply that I would get to see Nana one day, but not today, the more frequently I started hearing the message that if I didn't start being a good little girl, then perhaps some different foster carers would need to be found for me, a threat that shortly thereafter was acted upon. It wasn't until my third placement that I finally got to see her, nearly 7 months or so after I'd been taken into care. The change in her that had taken place over this relatively short period was horrifying. At first, she had no idea who I was. Then she started comparing me to her daughter. Then she started comparing me to her lovely little granddaughter, Emma. When she finally did identify me as Emma, she started asking me where my mummy and daddy were. After that visit, I didn't stop asking to go see her. I assumed that she'd just been ill and would be well again soon enough. After a few more weeks of my pestering, I was again moved, this time to my fourth and final placement. I'll say this for Janet and Ken Robertson. They were perfectly happy to take me to see my grandmother. After a couple of visits, however, it became clear to me that she wasn't going to get well again. I still asked to go and see her for a while because at that stage she was still being cared for in her home, and that house and its furnishings and carpets and pictures on the wall were the last remaining fragments of my life from before that terrible day that had ended everything. Once or twice, I sneaked into the little bedroom at the front of the bungalow where I'd occasionally slept over if my parents were going out for the night, and I'd shut the heavy curtains and lay down on the bed, looking through the darkness at the wardrobe in the corner of the room, just as I had looked at it through the darkness back then. I remember thinking that if I fell asleep, even for just a minute or two, then maybe when I woke, I might forget everything that had happened just for a few sweet seconds and be back in the before. It wasn't long, however, before she got transferred to residential care. Just as it had been for me, her home was taken away and her every day became the responsibility of strangers just doing a job. In place of the brown and mustard hallway carpet, and the blue sofa with its repeating gold maze design, and the top-loading washing machine that danced through its spin cycle, and the black and white TV she refused to get rid of, and the Tupperware box with its supply of cream crackers and cheddar cheese. Her world became white walls and green curtains, and easy white linoleum, and a circle of TV-facing, high-backed chairs on regulation carpeting. The move swiftly severed the last remaining strands of any connection she had to the present, and she spent the last decade of her life back in her childhood, telling everyone who talked to her that her father would soon be coming to collect her. She'd found those precious few seconds of waking ignorance I'd been looking for in that darkened bedroom and taken up permanent residence inside them. I must admit, from time to time, I found that there was a tiny little part of me that envied her.
And that's Huckleberry Hax reading from Virtual Thursday. Wonderful, Huckleberry. It's really really good writing. It's well, Second Life made you the author that you always wanted to be.
Yeah.
It is amazing. It turns us into who we want to be, or maybe we don't want to be. I mean, I don't want to be a book show host, to be honest. But if you're just tuning in, we have about 10 minutes left on the program, and there's so much stuff still to go through. I want to talk a little bit about the movie, but one question that arose as you were reading, um, and this being about VR, are you at all concerned as a writer to talk about things that can be sort of locked in time? I know that, I mean, I'm not a writer, but what is interesting, what I learn now through as a voracious reader and also now hosting this show, is a lot of people in literary fiction are sometimes very concerned to comment or incorporate current events because that will date the book.
Mm,
So I wonder, like, if you have, if your take on VR or even Second Life, uh, as I said earlier, for me or for a Second Lifer, these books, aside from being really well written, suspenseful plots and hilarious for Second Lifers, they have historical value that will not
yeah.
go away. So I wonder if that's something that you think of, like, if if my take on VR is like totally like 2019 or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a good question. I mean, as I said earlier on, I primarily write the stories that I'm interested in writing for myself. And I'm always aware of the fact that yes, this from some perspectives this might end up looking dated in a while. But again, you see, it depends upon what you write about. I don't think that fundamentally AFK has dated yet because it doesn't talk about some of the kind of the it doesn't really go into the technical details. There's no sense of the graphical world. I mean, if you were somebody who was reading AFK now and you were just into Second Life now, you would probably read it kind of thinking, well, you'd probably project when you were reading it the world as it is now onto the world that's portrayed in the book, even though it was written in a time when actually things looked very, very different.
Mhm.
But then there will be things like the coming of mesh. So there's at one point in the AFK novels they talk about the arrival of mesh and shadows, and these are things that people take for granted. And then there are occasions, not so much in AFK, but in some of the other books, Be Right Back, for example, there are references to world events. um in the book that I'm writing now, Love is a corrupted data stream. I've put in references to coronavirus and then had to change them because they were
Mm.
no longer accurate. So I'm not actually sure if that was a wise thing to do or not.
See, but maybe it's harder in with like real world stuff, physical world stuff, than with Second Life,
Yeah,
because again, I mean, the AFK books are like historical fiction in a way
yeah,
of
yeah.
of a continent, of a world that coexists to this one, and you're the ethnographer of that world to some extent.
I mean, I'd really like it if at some point in the future AFK was useful to people who wanted to know what Second Life was like back then. So I kind of I very much hope that it does capture in some way, some essence, some flavor of what it's like to be a person who is invested in the virtual world. Whether I'm successful in that aim or not,
I can
I don't
tell you,
know.
you are very successful in it, and I'm a very objective observer here. I, well, I'm a Second Life addict, but in that sense, I'm completely objective. No, but honestly, the way you describe the interaction with, I mean, these go really much deeper than just mechanics of Second Life in 2007. They really go into how what does it mean to communicate with each other? What does it mean to be unfaithful to someone? Or, I mean, one hilarious line there is, or interaction is, when somebody is complaining about um, their SL spouse not reacting, and then pretending, well, my computer was dead or something, um, and the private eye saying, well, maybe the computer was dead. That stuff does happen, and just that little interaction is also, to me, much more than just um, talking about technical issues. I mean, this could be like, oh, my cell phone was dead, or my Nokia fell down the toilet or something. That would
Yeah.
date it
Yeah. Yeah.
terribly. But you are hitting on basic human emotions of feeling, well, this person is maybe cheating on me and making stuff up. This person is lying to me.
I mean, it's I'd like to think that I'm approaching these things from a more psychological perspective, kind of focusing on the thoughts and feelings around these behaviors, and actually the behaviors themselves, because of course there are behaviors that become possible in Second Life that aren't really possible. About in terms of being in two places at once, for example, by having two different, the whole thing of outs and the whole thing of um, you know um, taking on a different identity, whether it's a different gender
Taking a different
identity or
exactly, a gender identity,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah, that
yeah.
that is, oh boy, Mr. Zuckerberg doesn't know what he's in for.
He
That's for sure.
don't- well, I mean,
He
when
wants to
we
be Caesar or Augustus, or who he wants to
yeah,
be. I mean, he has his
yeah.
people figuring it out. That's what he
And this
thinks.
is, and I've seen your tweets. This is the frustrating thing, is this, there's so much about Second Life technically which could be better, but in the time that Second Life has existed, there's been so much that's been learned about the psychological behaviors of
Yeah,
people, the interaction, the meaningfulness of it, and all of that just seems to have been ignored. So that they have to slap on a, what is it, a 4 foot exclusion zone at the last minute to reduce harassment. And you just think, really seriously, what research, what thinking have they actually done about what we've learned? It doesn't look like they've done anything
nothing.
at
They
all.
see they see big dollar signs, and they see
Yeah.
big extraction of value. And of course, at the core, the core issue is really also the very questionable business practices, but also the core business model. Even if their business morale and their ethics wouldn't be so shady, the business model of extracting data versus what Second Life is,
I mean,
frankly,
just think of it. I mean,
uh,
at the moment, they on Facebook, they collect information upon what posts you like, what posts you view, what comments you write. Imagine if there was that level of scrutiny in a virtual world. Every place that you go to is recorded. Every interaction you have with other people, every IM, every chat comment, everything you buy on the marketplace. Imagine that data being collected.
yeah.
And that's what we're talking about when we're
That's
talking
what
about
they're
the whistleblows.
salivating
That's
over.
right.
For us, it's
Exactly.
dystopia. They
Yeah.
salivating over that, and as we know, the technology, cameras can already see from where your eyeballs, from where your eyes look. The Oculus can observe you at all times
Mm,
and can
mm.
gather data, how much engaged you are with content. I don't want to waste the last few minutes with this dystopian scenario, because your movie
Yes.
Sturmer,
Stomol. Stomol.
Stürmel, sorry, it's very hard for a German to pronounce the umlaut correctly. It's really a major achievement, and I want to congratulate you. This is a major
Thank you.
achievement. The pacing is wonderful. The look, and I am on the record saying that it's impossible to make a feature-length narrative film in Second
Oh,
Life.
really?
Yes, I said it many times, and I was like, should I do it? And I had many plans, and I didn't follow through with them because I thought I cannot. It's going to be looked at as which is legitimate,
Mm,
a piece of fan fiction, or sort of like copying something. And I was really caught up in the technical limitations
Mm.
for telling a story. And I could not fathom in my mind a visual approach that would be unique enough to qualify it as a standing side by side with other animated approaches here. But you kind of pulled this off, and I gather
Thank you.
were you not concerned that this would be or was it also something like we say, fuck it, I want to see this thing, and if
Yeah.
my Second Life friends like it, that's fine.
Well, I've been taking photographs in Second Life for a while, and thinking, the whole Second Life photography thing has just come along so far. If your average Flickr photographer, it's just come along in leaps and bounds, and the quality of the photos is, it's just improved so much. And obviously, we're talking about a technological limitation here. You do have to have quite a fast PC in order to be able to film at that kind of level. But I was very much, it was something I wanted to do for a long time, was to create something in Second Life, but I just put it off and put it off and put it off, because it is a huge amount of work. I mean, I'm doing the sequel at the moment. We've been working on it for 18 months, which is the amount of time it took us to do all of Stonewall, and we're still nowhere near completion. It's probably not going to be done until December. It's a heck of a lot of work, and it's, very, very labor intensive, but it's a lot of fun when you see it starting to come together. And I just thought, it's got to be possible to do this. The way in which we need to do this is we need to think about this as being like a picture strip, like a comic strip book, but
Mhm.
kind of a filmed version of it. So in other words, static shots, focusing on certain points, minimal use of. I'm not big on. I'm not big on pans. I'm not big on having too much camera movements. I'm
Absolutely, and
not a
yes,
massive fan of the space navigator, though I do have one. And really to make it look like a comic book come alive. And I thought, if that's the approach that's taken, then we can hopefully get around some of these limitations. The limitations are real, and they take a lot of creative thinking, a lot of problem solving to get around them. And I wouldn't for a moment say that I've been more than 50% successful in getting around them. But it's a lot of fun when you suddenly kind of work out how to get around a technical limitation, how to present something in a way that won't be hampered by the technical limitation, but at the same time will look authentic and meaningful on film. So
that
yeah, a lot of it was about having fun, really.
that's what a true artist does. You look at limitations and then you create a visual approach, a style, a tone, a tonal palette
Yeah,
that works with these limitations, and don't fret over the fact that you can't do certain things
yeah.
because that will paralyze. Yeah, no, that is really fantastic. I mean, a lot of the other I mean, again, I mean this. I'm gonna get hate mail for this, but uh, there's amazing machinima out there. Don't get me wrong, and there are amazing practitioners, but nothing really much in the long form. That's where I was thinking, how could I sustain a narrative? Um, would you say that machinima is alive and well? Because I actually think it is. Last I was just checking some people that I used to know, and they're still doing stuff. I mean, it's just really out of the mainstream. There's no real sort of real life festival. I mean, there
Yeah.
used to be, if you would submit to a film festival, there used to be even like a, or do I have I dreamt this, that there was a machinima category at some point
Well, I
somewhere?
submitted
I don't
I,
know.
I submitted Stonewall to the Denver Digerati Supernova Festival. So it's a Denver-based digital animation festival for all forms of digital animation. Takes place every year, and it was the first year they'd ever had. Actually, they had two films as well as Stonewall. There was another film that the first time they'd had any films entered in the feature length category. And actually, Stonewall
Wow,
came first in the overall. Sorry, Stonewall came second in the overall main competition of that film festival, which was
that is
you know.
awesome.
It was awesome because it was a film made in Second Life, standing shoulder to shoulder with animations made, and using a whole range of other techniques.
That is
And
awesome.
the judges were, a couple of them had knowledge of Second Life, but they weren't Second Life people, and they were just judging it on the end product. Which, I entered it. Actually, Eric, who's in the audience, Eric Mondrian, basically pushed me into, and he found the this particular film festival as being the one that was right, for things like Stonewall. And they have had some pieces of machinima from Second Life in there before, much shorter pieces, obviously. So I had a bit of reluctance entering into it because I don't like competitions when it comes to things like art.
Yep.
But I did so, and I'm glad that I did, because I think it portrayed Second Life well to a community outside of Second Life.
Awesome. This is really awesome. Let's hope that more people do this. I remember there was a website once. They work with huge musical artists. Maybe somebody in the audience can refresh my memory if you know what I'm talking about. There was a website, and you could submit a music video. Like they had a song by U2, let's say. I mean, that level of artists, and they would say if you submit your music video, you can win a prize or whatever, and then you can maybe direct that, or have us direct it and we redo it or whatever, or we use it. And that was maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. And a few Second Life people did machinima, and they submitted it to this website. And then they issued I think on their website, they issued a statement where they said, well, we appreciate what people do, but we're not going to accept Second Life entries anymore because the quality is not high enough.
Oh,
It was worded in the most
wow.
offensive way, right? So they would accept anything like real life animation. The quality was pretty good that
Right.
they had, but it was such a punch in the stomach for these
Yeah.
Second Life folks. It was
Absolutely.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
But that
Well,
was a kind of an exploitative thing anyway. I think to me this always looked like a cheap pipeline for like the artists. They were sitting there like, yeah, give us some ideas for free, submit it to the website, and then we'll do the music video. That's how
yeah.
it's looked to me. But anyways,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
we are over time. We gotta quit because for several different reasons. The main reason being that the show is out of time,
Yeah.
and very mindful of people's times. I'm throwing up the last slide here because Shyla prepared such amazing slides. This is a collage with avatar names as they happen in the first 50, 60 pages that I've been reading of AFK. Stacy 12, Hardcastle, Starfish Picture Book, Arnold Torchemeyer, Bass Winchester, Step Stransky, Happiest Redmond, Inch Sideways, Sunshine Laminate, Susan Sonnet, and Arden Uriah. There's a whole bunch of missing. There's actually a Susie Sonnet was here in the audience earlier.
Yeah. Somebody was there with that name. I noticed that as well.
Oh my God, what's happening?
I've
Uh,
had people have made that as somebody once came up to me and they had named their avatar Inch Sideways. Inch is quite a big character in the
yes.
story, and yeah, out of tribute, which was both flattering and slightly unnerving.
Oh, this was Ava's,
All right,
my
thank you,
eldest
Eva.
attribute talk. Oh, and I forgot to say here the main Bottle 42 guy. Anyways, so Huck, this was really, really awesome. Thank you for coming. Wonderful, and congratulations to your all your things that you're doing. It's really it's just totally inspiring.
Thank you, Drax.
I hope that you can still read stuff for pleasure and stuff like that. That's really the purpose of this show,
Mm,
to entice people to read. And if you want to share what you're reading, just put it in the local chat, folks. Here, thank you, audience. Thank you for coming. Please check out the YouTube channel and consider subscribing, liking this video. You can rewatch it. There's the whole book club playlist, and also please consider joining. I'm not going to go through the credit slides today because we are fully out of time. But just thanks to my wonderful team, Isabel Sharon, Shiloh the Super Gecko, and Ruby Geek, who is not here today. Ruby is the set master. She builds the sets, with the exception of this one, which was built by Huckleberry, and it will stay around here, especially with the wonderful plywood exterior, which is really wonderful. It can be seen from the entire archipelago, even from the skyboxes. Oh my God! I just saw. Huckleberry says currently finished the three body problem. Oh my God. Don't get me started because I'm contemplating starting a reading group and a discussion group where we just discuss the three body problem. I read it three times. I read all three books three times. And the last time I read them, I read the German translation and the English translation by Ken
Oh
Liu
wow.
in parallel. It is an amazing book. Um,
I'm just about to start the second one, The Dark Forest.
I think, and some people disagree. I think the Dark Forest. I actually think it gets better. I mean, he's just warming up with the three body problem.
Uh,
I think the Dark Forest is much bigger in scope, and it really goes deep to these big philosophical questions. And then the third one is like as if you if I don't know. I don't even want to. Anyways, I don't know. Do you like it so far?
I think it's a really interesting book. I would quite like to discuss it with somebody else who's read it. I'm fascinated by it. I'm fascinated by the structure of the novel, which struck me as being quite different from anything else I'd read before.
Mhm.
I liked it. Yes, I liked it, but it was quite different from lots of science fiction books that I read before, and I'm looking forward to kind of reflecting on it. The reflection that is going to come when I read the second installment, when that will cause me then to kind of go back and reappraise aspects of the first book. So yeah, I was impressed by it, but I'm not done processing it yet.
You might want to. I think this. I think most readers agree that the second reading is really the most important one, and you
Mm.
really got to do a second read with this one. Um, Currently also obsessed with America and the cult of the cactus boots, but that's a whole different story.
Okay,
Uh,
doke.
Folks, look that one up. Anyway, so next Wednesday, we will have a free for all free discussion. We can discuss the three body problem or anything else, but it's at 11 o'clock. Please take note. It's reflected in the calendar. 11 a.m. Second Lifetime free for all, and we'll have three free for alls. Oh, this is the wrong slide. This is the 12 o'clock slide. I don't know where the other one is. But I have a documentary coming out that we worked on with Tom Bölstoff and his grad students for over 2 years, and it's coming out April 2nd. So up until then, we will have no guests, and it'll be a sort of improvised free for all, just hanging out and talking books, because I'm seriously very anxiety driven about this. And Huckleberry knows, as he said earlier, there is just millions of moving parts when you embark on this audiovisual stuff
Mm.
with others. Writing a book is easy, Huck. Making a movie, oh boy. I
I'd
don't know.
agree. I'd agree with that. Yeah,
Well, it's just more levels of just to check, I guess. I mean, I really don't want to make that. I mean, this is kind of tongue in cheek. I always say, like, coming from radio, maybe radio is double the work than writing, and then video is triple the work, I guess. Just
yeah,
because these three levels: writing, then the audio level, and then the visual level.
mm, yeah.
All right. Good night, everybody, or good day, good midday, and we'll see you all next week right here on the Second Life Book Club.
Thank you, Drax.